Hello friends. The last class we saw that the methods of interpretation, literary exegesis and evaluation, critical evaluation, mere verbalism, right from Aristotle to T.S. Eliot. So they resist theory. Those things, those movements are not theory at all, ill-defined, chaotic and hard to label. You have seen that. So the resistance comes from there, theory itself. Theory means the so-called movements. Now today we will consider another point. Resistance comes from language itself. You know, the opening of this essay, Paul Deman says that defining theory is practically impossible. That's the thing. Defining. How can you define theory? That is impossible, he says. The theoretical interest of theory is defining it. How can we define it? Because as you can see, how language now resists theory. That's the point today. Now, as we did yesterday, we will go through these main points. What we are going to do today. Language is epistemologically empty. Epistemology, theory of knowledge, means there is nothing in language. Language is empty. Why do we say like that? Because we have been thinking that language is loaded with concepts, loaded with the things of the world, the phenomenal world, the world created outside. I mean, outside means outside language. So, epistemologically empty, that means there is nothing in that. Language cannot provide a stable cognitive field. So it is epistemologically empty and therefore it cannot provide a stable cognitive field. Truth. Language cannot represent or present truth. The resistance to theory is the use of language about language. Therefore, resistance to theory is use of language about language. So, about language means meta-language. Meta-language means criticism. Criticism is meta-language about literary discourse. So, if literary discourse has no meaning, then meta-language, that is, criticism also has no meaning. Language that you use for criticism and critical evaluation also has no meaning. Therefore, what happens? Language resists theory. But theory is something solid. But not language is not solid. So, language resists theory. Now we will further explain, then I think both of us will understand it better. First point is language is the most overdetermined, disfigured and disfiguring term. Overdetermined means many people have tried to define it and they have spoken many things about it. That is overdetermined means. Culture, the term culture is overdetermined, we say, like that. And it disfigured and disfiguring concept or term. Because we don't understand, that's why many people say many things about language. Then secondly, language is incapable of representing the phenomenal world, the world outside. There's a negative knowledge about language. So far we had a positive knowledge about language, but that the phenomenal world can be, phenomenal world means the world created, the things in the world, the concepts, ideas, can be, language can represent these things. That is a positive knowledge. When we think that it is impossible, language cannot do it, that is negative knowledge about language. Third is, the signifier is a matter, that is materiality of the signifier. The word used by, the expression used by Paul Deman, signifier is a matter. So you can see there are graphic properties and phonic properties. Lines are there, sound is there. So that is a matter. You can see, you can touch. If it is a cat, C-A-T, cat, you can touch it, you can feel it, you can see that. Right? So it's a matter. But the signified is not a matter, means materiality of the signified. The signifier is a matter, but the signified is not a matter. It is only a mental concept. Further you will see that. Then Roland Barthes and Marcel Proust, their views. We will see in detail. Today, if there is time, the relationship is only conventional, he says. The relationship between signifier and signified is only conventional. It's not natural. It is not at all natural. It is conventional, or you can say arbitrary. Arbitrary. That's another expression when you refer to the relationship. Arbitrary. Arbitrary means no logic in that. In one language you call tree, tree. Another you say bird. Another you say maram. That's in Malayalam. My mother tongue. So, that is, you can say it is arbitrary. And also determined by culture, tradition, and customs and so on. So there is absolutely no natural relationship between signifier and signified. And then he said, literature is fiction. Why is literature fiction? It's not because it is improbable probability and probable improbability, or it is a product of imagination. No. Because language is epistemologically empty. Language, there is nothing. So, literature is fiction. Not that the other one, Aristotle's what Aristotle taught us, or theory of imagination, none of those things. Language is empty. Then how can it present facts? It cannot. Therefore, if not facts, then what comes next is fiction. That is why he said literature is fiction. You got an idea now. We go deep into that, means explain, not deep. I will explain this. Linguistics, language resists theory. That's point today. Language resists theory. Linguistics, the science of language is autonomous. No intuitive function for language. Linguistics, language, not loaded with the things of the world. Linguistics, science of language is also independent, autonomous. It is practically it doesn't carry or it is not in any way dependent on the phenomenal world. It's not dependent on it. Physics is independent science. Although physics deals with the phenomenal world. Physics is independent. I think that now autonomous against. Zoology, for example, that is biology is independent. Science is independent. Not at all depending upon the world outside or the things created. Exactly like that, linguistics or the science of language is autonomous. And we use language for no intuitive function for that. We use language for producing literary discourses. Literature does not provide any information. Why? Language is epistemologically empty. These are observations made in this essay. Since language is epistemologically empty, literature, we use language for producing literature. Therefore, literature does not give any information. That is again a negative knowledge about literature or literary discourses. So far we had a positive knowledge about literary discourses. But now we have a negative knowledge about literary discourses. That means in literature there is no information. You don't get any information. All what you get is, what you get to know something about is the language that you are using. That's all. And then we use language for producing discourses about literature, and then meta-language about literature. So you use language for producing literature, you use language for meta-language for criticism and evaluation. Exegesis. For that also you use language. Therefore what happened? The meta-language does not provide any information, a stable cognitive field, so mere verbalism. So here also it is verbalism. The meta-language that we use is also mere verbalism. There is nothing in it. Because our basic proposition is language is epistemologically empty. So literature is empty. The discourse about literature is empty. So whatever you speak about literature is mere verbalism. I suppose that is the arguments. That's what we are going to see. So here we begin. Language is the most, we have seen the over-determined, disfiguring term. Then what happens is we have misunderstood the word language, the term language. We have been thinking that it has power to represent the phenomenal world. We look for concepts like good, bad, beauty, ugly. See? Then you have got concepts like the language, fish. You have got things like fish, meat. You don't find these things here in language. Do you find meat in language? No. Do you pen? Do you find pen in language? No. You find P-E-N, that's not a pen. You write P-E-N on a piece of paper and give it to a student. Come on, you write something. You cannot do it. Tree. No T-R-E. That does not have branches, no leaves, no flowers, no fruits, no trunk, no root, nothing. So Paul Deman gives an example. No sane man, sensible man, can grow or will grow grapes in the luminosity of the word day. What does that mean? Day, the word day. That brings before you the idea of the sun shining. But there is no sun in day, the word day. There is no shining in the word day. There is no heat. Nothing of that sort. Then how can you grow grapes in the luminosity of the word day? It's not possible. Isn't it? Tree, T-R-W. You don't find any of those things there. Haves and have-nots. That's why Paul Deman in this essay says, we are poor readers of Marx's German ideology. Because according to this theory, German ideology, there's nothing in it. That is epistemologically empty. So we are poor readers. We have been in a way hoodwinked by the German ideology of Karl Marx. That's what he says. Listen. Then, when we say witching time of the night, where is witching? Where is the witch? Where is the night? It is not a night. Witching. Heard melodies are sweet, those unheard are sweet. Where are melody? There are heard melodies, unheard melodies, or melodies. None of those things. Those are empty of meaning. That's what Paul Deman says. But the point is, why do we think like this? Why do we misunderstand language like this? That is the famous quote from that essay. We are confusing materiality of the signifier with the materiality of the signified. We think that signifier is a matter, and so signified is also a matter, but that is not correct. The reason why we misunderstand, the reason why we think that language is loaded with ideas, concepts, and all the phenomenal world is because we misunderstand or we confuse. There is a confusion in our mind. What is the confusion? That we confuse the materiality of the signifier with the materiality of the signifier. That's the reason. Now, you remember these ideas, 1916. It was Saussure for the first time pointed out this. In language there is no presence, only absence and difference. The post-structuralist approach to literature, we can say, this is also a very, very strong post-structuralist statement about, in fact this is a strong statement about post-structuralism. It's very clear now, 1916, when Saussure said, there is no presence in language, only absence and difference. From there comes difference and all those things, we can see reconstruction. So here we are. When you say cat, dog, C-A-T, no cat there. D-O-G, no dog, there's no barking there. But why do we understand it differently? Because you have got in cat, no presence of cat. In dog, no presence of, but they are different. Listen, they are different. They have got different, we use different phonetic symbols for that. Or the sound as such, if you don't know phonetics also don't know that. Cat, dog, different. So we understand it that way. That's the point, that's the main point. Understand? And then you see, therefore, it says, what we have been thinking, that language is loaded. That is a wrong perception about language. So the conclusion is, language is epistemologically empty. When you come to these two great men, Roland Barthes and Marcel Proust, what is their opinion? Barthes, in an essay written praising and admiring Roman Jakobson, says that there is a convergence of coming together of sound and meaning. That is onomatopoeia. When we say wind, there is a convergence of sound and meaning. Again, that is a misunderstanding. Wind, there is no wind in it. But even such a great writer and thinker, a philosopher, who stands Janus face to be said, that is, he is structuralist as well as post-structuralist. He has two faces, like the goddess Janus. From there you get January now. The year that is gone and the year that is coming. So therefore he is called January. The word January comes from that. So that way we can say that Roland Barthes, he has got two faces. One is the structuralist and the other is post-structural. But even he says that the word represents a meaning. Phonic properties, this is what he says, phonic properties. The properties, sound properties, so to say, sound. They reflect the meaningness. Now we have seen that is wrong. Then Marcel Proust says, signifiers are motivated. There is a motivation. What he means is that in every signifier, present is the essence of the signifier. In every signifier, there is the presence of the essence of the signifier. That means, both these ideas, they say, language is loaded with ideas. See, the first one he says, Roland Barthes says, the convergence of sound and meaning. Sound and meaning. Because sound reflects meaning, onomatopoeia. the cuckoo, for example, wind, whistle, these are words. But we have seen those words, whether they reflect the sound of the sound or the sound and the sound sound has no effect on the meaning, because we saw it is epistemologically empty. Then Marcel Proust says that motivated, signifiers are motivated. That means the essence of the signifier you can find in a word. That also we have seen wrong, because it's empty. So that is their view. Then the relationship between these two, for example, see, the relationship between these two, as we have seen, not at all natural. There's no logic to explain. If I say pen, how can you prove that this is pen? That's a word, not this one, a word, pen. Or I say, Shakespeare says, the morn in russet mantle clad walks over yon high eastern hills. What? Is there eastern hill in your book? Is there morn walking in your book? There's no such thing. The relationship, not at all natural. They are arbitrary, conventional we can say, or culturally determined you can say, or determined by tradition you can say, or by use you can say. Otherwise there is no logical relationship between the signifier and the signifier. I hope that you are following me. So ultimately it says language is independent, it is autonomous. Language, you cannot force language to refer or connect language with the phenomenal world. That is not at all possible, because language is autonomous, and whatever semantic function it has, meaning, semantic means meaning, or a referential function it has. Language has a referential function, language has a semantic function. These are imposed on it. There is no logic for it, no basis, only conventional. That's why I say language is autonomous. Now another point I tell you, if suppose all these things are not here in this world, but still language can be there, isn't it? So when I say this, conventional semantic function is conventional or arbitrary and so on. See, another way you can look at it like this. It is arbitrary depending on the culture of a people who use a particular language. That's what I said. The object tree with branches and so on, it remains the same whether you call it bird, maram or tree. Look at that. That means, what does that again means? Language is autonomous. It is independent of the world outside. Outside means outside the language. Same object, different words are used. Same object, different signifiers. Why? That depends on the people who use or refer to that particular object. Understand? Therefore, again we can say language is autonomous. The autonomy of language that we have to accept. Then, coming to our conclusion, in language, or language is incapable of representing reality. Language is incapable of presenting truth, because language is epistemologically empty and it is autonomous. It has a referential function. It has a conventional function, and conventional function is the meaning. And finally we conclude, since language is epistemologically empty, language cannot convey truth, and so the product that language is a stuff with which we produce, or we use language to produce literary discourses. So literary discourses are empty, and the meta language about literary discourses, that is criticism, interpretation, exegesis, and critical evaluation, that is also empty. So language resists theory. You cannot have a theory because we are using language. Language is empty of any meaning. So second point is language resists theory. Opening of the essay, he says, the theoretical interest of theory is that it is difficult to define it. But we will define it somehow later. So what actually he is trying is, it is in this essay, he is searching, this is a search. A search for what? A search for a stable cognitive field. A grammar of text production. A grammar of text production. That's why when he gives a list of critics, yesterday we had it, Auerbach, T.S. Eliot, Wordsworth, Dr. Johnson, Coleridge, then you have got Sidney, I'm mixing up, isn't it? And all the North American critics and European critics. He left out two names, Northrop Frye and Kenneth Burke. In Northrop Frye, archetypes of literature, that I have taken about 12 or 15 lectures on that, archetypes, literary archetypes. There he says it is a theory. Because theory should be such that it should allow, there should be scope for extra linguistic generalization. Modalities of text production. What happens today is theoretical world, the entire theoretical world is engaged in text reception. But what Paul Deman says that is not theory. Theory should be, it should deal with the modalities of text production. And here Northrop Frye, he has a grammar, textual codes he has. What is that, you know? Archetypes, literary archetypes. One such literary archetype is lost and found. Lost and found. If you analyze any text, you will find ultimately you will reach in a lost and found situation. A simple example is the Tempest, lost and found. And later you can see, you take any text, ultimately the last thing. So there what happens is there is extra linguistic generalization. That codes he says, this is a code. So if we can identify the code of text production, codes of text production, then that is theory. None of the other things are theory. So here, as I am concluding, will say, the second resistance comes from language itself. I hope you have followed. And yesterday also we wound up like this. If you have got any doubts, you can contact me. In this case also, any further explanation required, definitely you can contact me. And I don't say that this is the last explanation or the ultimate explanation of this essay, the resistance to theory. This is what I understand. I don't claim that this is the final word on Paul Deman's The Resistance to Theory. All that is a very interesting essay. Very highly interesting. You must read it. I don't want to suggest you must read it, but I must read it again and again. Till we meet again. Bye.